Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell, Florida State, putting the finishing touches on fall camp. And I want to take a step back and just empty the notebook. Go back over the last 3 to 4 weeks. Who generated the most amount of buzz for Florida State in fall camp? Look, I'll say this. Do we still have a lot of question marks about Florida State going into 2025? Of course. We had question marks about this football team that we just weren't going to get answered until we see this football team in the fall. But I'll say this, though. I think you heard some really exciting things about a lot of really important football players going into 2025. Want to empty the clip, so to speak, fired up to get into it. We're going to be all over the place talking about a bunch of different players, a bunch of different spots on this roster, fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the Florida State fans, appreciate you guys. It been a blast talking this football team in fall camp, trying to determine what are we going to get from this team in the 2025 year. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, now, if we were to sit here and say, hey, who was the one player that won fall camp, that generated the most amount of buzz, that question is very easy to answer. True freshman running back Usman Chroma. I mean, it was every single dang day, the praise for this kid was kind of overwhelmingly loud. Now, what fires me up the most about Usman Chroma is not necessarily the big plays that he was generating all of fall camp. I knew this kid was an elite ball carrier going back to his high school days. I would say one of the more impressive running backs that Florida State has brought into this program in a really long time. The question that I think a lot of us had was, can he, during fall camp, show this staff that he can do the other things at a high level? That was one of the biggest takeaways that I got from Usman Chroma, is like what he's doing in pass protection, like the small stuff outside of just carrying the football. That is what prohibits a lot of freshmen from getting on the field at this position. Usman Chroma, I think, answered those questions in an overwhelmingly positive manner. I would be stunned if this kid is not the leading rusher for this Florida State football team. And quite frankly, week 1 against Alabama, I think he has earned the trust of this coaching staff to get a very heavy workload. The other thing's the physicality. I don't think there's any question mark about this kid having the adequate physicality to play at the college football level year 1 as a freshman. By far the biggest winner for Florida State. Now, why is it so important? We know this team is going to want to run the football. And we do know that Gus Malzahn, when he identifies a guy that he thinks a little bit different in that running back room, he ain't afraid to ride him, right? Go back and look at what he did with UCF with RJ Harvey. Are we going to that kind of treatment for Usman Chroma in 2025? I'm not sure if I'm going to go that far. I think you have some other running backs that you can lean on, but I think it became very clear in fall camp that there was one running back that was really standing out, and I expect Florida State to ride Usman Chroma a lot in the 2025 year. Number 2, give me Tommy Castellanos. Now, here's the thing that stands out to me about this kid during fall camp. I didn't hear a ton of problems with accuracy, and I didn't hear a ton of problems with turnovers, right? And the thing that stands out to me the most about Florida State on offense during fall camp is, look, you have a quarterback that is not meant to dominate in fall camp. Like, Tommy Castellanos plays his best football on Saturdays when he can improvise, when he can use his legs, use his athleticism. Those are stuff that you can't really tap into during fall camp. The fact that the Florida State offense seemed to have a lot of success in fall camp, and Tommy Castellanos seemed to be playing pretty dang well during fall camp, that bodes very well for Florida State going into 2025, because this kid's best football is going to be played on Saturdays when things are live. The other thing I'll say is, look, I know there are a lot of people that doubt Tommy Castellanos, that there was a reason that Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell very, very quickly identified him as the quarterback that they wanted to run this offense. They both have experience with him. Mike Norvell coached against him. Gus Malzahn coached with Tommy Castellanos, coached Tommy Castellanos. Both of these, and look, Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn, say what you want about them, that they are very, very good offensive minds. And they both came to an agreement that we think we can build an offense that can be really, really productive with Tommy Castellanos as our quarterback. I got some quiet confidence that Tommy can be a guy for Florida State in the 2025 year. The third guy that you got to mention here is Javon Bogs. I mean, we had one of our biggest question marks going back to spring practice, and it kind of continued into fall camp, was who's going to be that wide receiver 3? Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, probably going to be your 2 most productive pass catchers, but we needed a third wide receiver to emerge. We weren't sure who it was going to be. I think it's very, very clear that it's going to be Javon Bogs. Now, here's the thing that fires me up about this kid the most. I think he might be your most complete wide receiver in the room. I mean, you look at Deuce Robinson, there's a special skill set that he has working vertically down the field with that 6'6" frame. You look at Squirrel White and the stuff that he can do not only vertically, but with the football in his hands. The wide receiver that I see being most productive in that intermediate passing attack is probably going to be Javon Bogs. And the thing that stood out to me the most was the consistent praise that we heard from Javon Bogs. It wasn't just a freshman flashing every other practice. It was consistently showing up, creating separation, getting open, and catching the football. I think he's clearly your wide receiver 3. And that was one of the biggest question marks we had for Florida State heading into fall camp, was who was going to step up as that third pass catcher in this room. Javon Bogs going to be that guy for Florida State in 2025, and I feel dang good about saying it right now. Last one on offense, I'm going to go with the whole entire starting 5 offensive line. The biggest thing that we needed to see from Florida State during fall camp was this unit playing together. From a personnel standpoint, I look at this unit and say the starting 5 should be a very good unit. My biggest concern was they didn't get to play a ton of football together in spring practice. You know, Gunnar Hansen was working through an injury. Micah Pettis was working through an injury. I believe Luke Pettibon was banged up a little bit as well. My concern was not the talent in the starting 5. My concern was, is it all going to come together with a bunch of new faces that weren't really able to practice much together in spring? I mean, it sounds like this unit stayed relatively healthy during fall camp, which is a heck of a lot more than a lot of other programs can say about their starting 5. It was crucial that this offensive line stayed healthy and got a lot of reps together. And it sounds like they did during fall camp. You feel decent about this offensive line doing what it was made to do, what it was created to do. I mean, there was no secret what kind of offensive lineman Florida State was going to go out and get in the portal. We want big bodies who are moving people off the line of scrimmage. We need an offensive line that can road grade a little bit, that can move bodies off the line of scrimmage. I think this unit can do it. Now, look, do you have question marks about pass protection? Yeah, absolutely. In an ideal world, you don't have to do a ton of pocket passing with Tommy Castellanos at quarterback. Like, hey, we want to run the football. We want to move Tommy outside the pocket. I think this offensive line fits. It fits what you're looking for them to do. And I got some confidence that they can go out and do it going into 2025. Defensive side of the football, bunch of names that really stood out to me. I want to start on the defensive line. 2 names that I think pop out the most: Jason Jenkins and Jaden Jones. Now, Jason Jenkins, because he's going to be back healthy. It's not like he went out and dominated fall camp. It sounded like Jason Jenkins was going to miss significant time for Florida State when he went down in the spring. Scrimmage with Florida State last week, a guy that it sounds like is going to be ready to go and contribute week 1 against Alabama. Look, Jason Jenkins was probably my favorite, maybe outside of James Williams, was probably my favorite defensive lineman that Florida State brought in. I think he brilliantly fits what Tony White wants to do in terms of the versatility and the different fronts that Tony White wants to use. Having him back week 1 against Alabama going to be really big, because this is a guy that has shown us in the SEC at Tennessee, he can be a force. He can be a really good football player, can be present in the run game, can give you a little pass rush production as well, play a lot of different spots on the defensive line. Having him ready to go, really big. And then Jaden Jones. This kid's going to be a contributor. The overall takeaway that I have for Florida State on defense, specifically on the defensive line, is we are a significantly deeper unit than what we were last year. I mean, I don't know if there were 5 or 6 guys that Florida State trusted to play last year. That number's up to 8, 9, 10 going into 2025. Now, the question I continue to have is, can we get a difference maker to step up? Like, can Daryl Jackson be a true game wrecker in 2025? Can James Williams be the weapon that we think he can be in the pass rush? I look at the depth of this defensive line and say it's way better than it was last year. A lot more bodies that are above the line that we trust to play. Now we just need the difference makers to step up and go dominate some football games. Kind of going back to what we saw in 2023 with guys like Braden Fisk, guys like Jared Verse. I'll give you another one that kind of has me exciting. Elijah Herring, quiet, not like a ton of overwhelming buzz. I'm not going to get up here and say Elijah Herring's going to be a first-team All-American backer for Florida State. The thing that fires me up the most about this kid is I shouldn't say he's played a lot of football. He's a grown man. He's an old grown man. The thing that fires me up about Elijah Herring is that he's kind of the guy in the linebacker room. Well, Florida State didn't have this last year. Like, they didn't have a single linebacker that played over 450 snaps. I look at Elijah Herring and say, it sounds like he's not going to leave the football field very often for Florida State. I love what Tony White does with his linebackers, and it sounds like we at least have one that we trust to kind of be a stalwart at the second level of this defense. You've heard some really good things about Omar Graham as well, which I think excites you, but I think you make no mistake about it. Elijah Herring, he's the guy that can be a steady presence for this Florida State defense that Florida State didn't have last year. Like, they were just rotating, trying to find a linebacker that could make it work, and they really never found one. Elijah Herring being that guy is big for this defense. How about Earl Little? Really talented player that has always struggled to – Earl Little, very talented football player that has struggled to find the position for him to thrive in, whether it's cornerback, whether it's safety, whether it's playing nickel. He was born to play the rover position for this Tony White defense. And what I'm hearing is that him in this new role, letting him kind of be doing a lot of different things in this Florida State defense, whether it's coming into the box, whether it's playing a little man coverage, that's big for him. Sometimes with these players, it's just about finding the right spots for them to be successful. I don't think anyone questioned Earl Little's ability as a football player, just him settling into a position that he was comfortable doing. It sounds like we have that. That's the thing that I love the most about Tony White is he is a player's coach. As much as we want to talk about the 3-3-5 and what Tony White wants to do, he's going to build the defense around his personnel. I think he's a wizard at putting guys in the right spots to be successful. I think you're going to get the best from Earl Little at this position. Last one, Jeremiah Wilson. I mean, last year, Florida State spent a lot of money in the portal and missed on a bunch of guys. You brought in a guy like Marvin Jones to be a dominant edge rusher. Didn't really happen. You brought in Malik Benson to be your wide receiver one. Certainly didn't happen. We went out and spent a decent amount of money on Jeremiah Wilson. Everything we are hearing about this kid is he is a true cornerback one for Florida State going into 2025. That's exactly what we spent our money for. That's exactly what we sound like we're going to get in the 2025 year. Ben, ever since he stepped foot on campus, he's he is the best cornerback in this room. Learned a lot about Florida State. It feels like the hit rate in terms of the new faces that they brought into the portal, you have a higher hit rate than you had last year. It might not be as flashy, but I feel like we trust a lot of these players going into 2025. And again, the biggest question for me is, can we get guys to step up and be some of the best players in this conference? I'm looking at Daryl Jackson, looking at Deuce Robinson, looking at Usman Chroma, and say, we think we have a much more solid roster, but if we want to surprise a lot of people, we need guys to step up and become some of the better players in the sport. You got some candidates, just got to have that happen. It's hard to beat an Alabama team just being solid, right? You got to have difference makers. We're going to find out real quick who those difference makers going to be. We'll pause it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.